Sabrina 2000s comic, issue 79. Zelda says she loves the shows on TV at Halloween. Hilda says she loves pulling tricks on kids at Halloween, and even Zelda laughs. And Sabrina says that witches aren't allowed to use magic on mortals. A complete contrast from the 70s comic. It's jarring after we just had them acting like the 70s versions of themselves. It's trying to be more realistic, but the only way this could be ever enforced is with constant surveillance of witches. Because otherwise they wouldn't know that witches were using magic on mortals. And if that was the case, then the resistance Sabrina formed would have been doomed immediately as soon as they started talking. It got to the point where I started assuming that they only know about the spells they cast by having spyware in their magic batteries. I doubt the writer was even aware of the magic battery idea from all the way back in the 70s, though. Once a year on Halloween, witches are allowed to use magic freely in the mortal realm as long as it doesn't harm mortals and they don't figure out where the magic is coming from. Isn't that always the case? Why isn't this always the case, then? This writer is completely clueless. Sabrina actually asks why this was kept from her, and gets a good explanation that most kid witches are too young to use their magic responsibly, and would end up showing off their magic in front of their mortal friends. You mean like Shinji did? Why isn't it explained why he got away with it? This writing has no self-awareness at all. The writer is clearly making things up as she goes along, and not thinking through her concepts. Like the fact that if witches aren't under constant surveillance, they'd be acting like every day was Halloween. Why is this even special to them? There's no reason this rule would even be the case for Halloween if they're like this. Shinji says after boring padding that they could go to a theme park haunted house and use magic for fun. It was immediately obvious that Sabrina wouldn't be allowed to bring Harvey with her, so she just wastes my time suggesting it. They have a good point, and he is a grouch. He refuses to come with her there and acts like an asshole. Amy admits that since she's no longer a threat, she might as well tell her what we fortunately know is the truth for a fact. He's tired of both of them. Sabrina wonders what happened to Harvey. This is how I know I'm dealing with a bad writer. Lampshading doesn't make it okay, and I'm tired of having to say that. After Sabrina goes to the theme park, and Landra hates having to wait in line so long with Shinji for a half hour without moving an inch, we see Hilda waste our time talking instead of acting, and some more talking. I wasn't so mad about too much dialogue in Archie Sonic's previews because that comic was always interesting. This is taking place on normal Earth though, so it can get boring very easily. Salem says they could always go to a real haunted house that his cats told him about. Sure, it's a shame that somehow, no one waiting in line with them is reacting to what they're talking about. Everyone's deaf just because they're off screen. After Shinji summons a ghost to scare people, I wonder why they're bothering to go to the haunted house, because there's no mortals to scare. They see a light and wonder if someone's there, and go in eventually. And Shinji sits on a piano chair. The piano says, "How dare you?" Salem tells them to stay here and go upstairs. Hilda sends people away with the exact same green ghost as Shinji. I forget how uncreative this writer is. Why would the ants wonder if they've gone too far and then change their minds? And at least Harvey feels bad about being rude to Sabrina and is lonely. Sabrina messes with Shinji for no reason, and he summons a headless horseman to joke around. Harvey tries to go catch Newbie with Sabrina, and Hilda uses magic to scare him into fainting, even though she wasn't established to have anything against him. The ants then worry before laughing about it, reminding me of the 70s comic where this kind of thing happened all the time. Sabrina's friends get creeped out by the portraits looking at them, and then Shinji gets stood up to for constantly playing tricks on them. For some reason, Sabrina's scared of the gargoyles and they run away, when obviously a single spell could deal with this. A monster shows up in front of them, and Salem recognizes him, so he turns into a human and they act friendly to each other. They were roommates back in magic school. He means college. It's not a boarding school. They were the school pranksters. Again. The gargoyles are pets of his that suddenly act like friendly dogs to the characters, and Salem wonders how his friend got exiled. Shinji gets stared at by Rune. He sees a painting of his father, and the story ends with Sabrina's aunt scaring them. Even Harvey helped. Sabrina 2000s comic, issue 80. For some reason, autumn usually makes Sabrina and Landra sad, and Landra says it's always sunny in the other realm Beachlands. And my time is wasted with recap. Sabrina's trying to figure out a way to combine other spells to fix the problem. And somehow Landra has no faith in her and expects me to believe that witches have already discovered every spell that could exist. Yeah, I still don't buy that Sabrina can't do this. If it turns out she can, logically, it wouldn't be because she's the best witch ever. It would be because all the others are too stupid because the writing sucks. This comic keeps acting like there's thousands of spells, but obviously if there were thousands of individual spells that you had to memorize individually, it would take forever to become even good at magic. There's a reason I always thought of magic in terms of there's just a few different types of magic you can do, like summoning, shape-shifting, teleportation, telekinesis, and all of the spells fall into those categories. Imagine how long it would take for a witch to become even mediocre at magic if she had to learn individually how to be good at summoning every single thing. That's what the comic expects you to believe if there's thousands of spells. Why wouldn't a witch be able to give a merman legs? Because they always specify merman. Why would it be any different just because it's a merman? Wouldn't there be billions of spells then? If it's so specific that the object that you're transforming is a factor and that's a spell all by itself? Why can he not be given legs, but presumably he could be given something else permanently? Shinji says that Landra needs to invent a phone that works underwater. That just points out a plot hole. Why doesn't anyone use magic so that she can just talk to her boyfriend on the phone? She doesn't have to visit him directly, though of course I understand she'd want to kiss him. I just realized, you don't need legs, just have a wheelchair. Why can't they just give him a wheelchair at least? Landra shows up again really fast with her boyfriend. Sabrina says she's arbitrarily gonna need a little more preparation for a permanent transformation spell. Because nonsense! She'll need things to represent the elementals. Because bullshit. This writer's just making stuff up as she goes along. Continuity be damned. Sonic as a franchise is a lot more flexible than Sabrina is. With Sabrina, there are things that you can't change without being confusing and annoying. With Sonic, I really don't care what the setting is, and it usually has the same rules anyways, like Sonic's fast, all the characters have the same powers, and the tone is all over the place. This is using magic completely differently, so I don't know why it's in Sabrina at all. It means I can't take it seriously. She gives Landra the Earth Elemental representative. I don't care. I'm skipping these pages because it's so obvious she could just point. I would have thought this was interesting and cool if this was a different franchise. She gives him legs, she gets thanked for it, and he still looks fishy for no reason at all. Couldn't they just give him robot legs? Do those count as legs too? Why didn't anyone try that before? Sabrina says he'll just have to wear long pants all the time, as I'm just wishing that the writer watched the 70s Sabrina cartoon at least before writing this comic. This whole scene didn't need to exist. Sabrina's not sure she should tell the teacher what she did because she likes the idea of it being a secret spell. And a guy in a magic review has a truth charm set in the room to force Sabrina to list off the spells she's mastered in the past year along with Hansel. I'm glad it was explained as a truth charm, so she doesn't have to look like an idiot. This is because he wants to see how Sabrina's improved as a witch, because she just had to be sent to a magic school she clearly never needed, so this wouldn't happen. Why isn't Hansel punished for admitting that he used a persuasion spell? Why doesn't anyone use it on the Queen then? Why don't any of the Four Blades rebels use the truth charm or persuasion spell on Celeste if they think she's making the tree sick? Because apparently Hansel doesn't get punished for using persuasion spells, so that means that it's allowed. It also makes Shinji's entire backstory look forced when you have a truth charm in the continuity. The Four Blades movement would have just been much less risky, and instead of using violence, they would have tricked the person they wanted to overthrow into having a truth charm. And then he would have listed off the spells he used. And they would have had a tape recorder there. Sabrina reveals that she's been able to see love connections between two people. Why is she told that this isn't a competition? I mean, they would hate Consul too. This writing is dumb. Sabrina intimidates him because of what she told him. And I'm somehow expected to believe that not even the Queen can bring dead plants back to life. Any witch would be able to do that, because any witch throughout the entire franchise has been able to summon anything. There's never been limits on what they can summon. It's so stupid. You can summon anything, so you'd be able to summon a replacement for a dead plant that's identical to it. No one would know the difference. So that would be seen as bringing it back to life. That's stupid. This writer has no idea what she's doing. He plans on telling the council about how powerful she is, when it's none of his business, because forced bullshit drama. It's not like this franchise was a comedy or something. It's not like she's gonna be hired for the council, and so she's under stricter standards. Why would the council be afraid of anybody when it's like strength in numbers against her? This is just immediately giving me flashbacks to when the Brotherhood was bitching about how powerful Knuckles is. This is pulling a Ken Panders on us, with all the council not trusting Sabrina while Hilda is the only one defending her. The entire council decides to place Sabrina under surveillance. Wouldn't that be the case with every witch? Landra says that it wasn't a good idea for Sabrina to reveal that stuff to the teacher. Why is she blaming her when she would know that Sabrina was under a truth spell? Forcing her to reveal that stuff to her. Sabrina's told to go to the council immediately, and she gets imprisoned for 3 days. I have a question. What's the point of this? The whole point of them putting her under surveillance is supposed to be to see what kind of insanely powerful stuff she'd be able to do. Anyone would assume that they would be watching her when she's living out her life. Anyone would have assumed that all witches were under surveillance anyways, which has literally been the case since the 70s. Since the 60s, where they would write down lists of every bad deed witches did. What is the point of having her in one place, under observation? She's not gonna do anything that way, because she thinks she's not even allowed to get out of there. The evil councilman says that she's a threat just because she's getting more angry than ever. Why wouldn't she be angry? If they're that evil, it really makes no sense that they don't execute her. Obviously, it's because meta logic, she's the main character, but if Shinji's parents were killed, then they aren't above that. Another thing that the council is never above is transformation spells. Why don't they turn her into a cat? They're allowed to imprison her when she didn't do anything wrong yet. So obviously they don't have rules. Why wouldn't they just take away her powers? One of the council members is actually surprised that a witch could turn dirt into gold. Go figure. This writer's really stupid. Somehow Sabrina is the only witch who's ever mended a broken bone with little effort. Again, this writer has no idea what the Sabrina series is even like. There's never been any indication that witches could have limits, aside from a few instances that I always called bullshit on anyways. It's so obvious that these characters are acting just like mortals. Like the writer forgot these council members were witches, not mortals who have never encountered a witch before. How do they not realize they're being just as evil as the mortals that persecuted witches? Once they realize that not all witches are guaranteed to be evil because they're that way? Won't they just take away her powers right away instead of making her suffer? One of the council members think that the mer people will take over the land because of Sabrina. Because it's not like witches who were established to be more powerful than mer people could take them, could effortlessly defeat them, could cast a spell on them so that they wouldn't be able to leave the sea. It's too late to portray witches having limits at this point. It always looked arbitrary and stupid. These witches can freeze people in time. I'm pretty sure they have no reason to be scared of anybody. One of the council members says that if they can get Sabrina to work for them, they'll be able to benefit. Duh. So why didn't any of them think of that earlier? If they're so evil that they're fine with imprisoning an innocent teenage girl, It makes no sense that they didn't cast a brainwashing spell on her and get her to work for them immediately. Hilda yells at them and storms off. The Queen tells Sabrina to create a portal to a forest. If she could do that all along, what took so long for her to escape? I have to assume she was so scared of what the council would do to her if they found out she escaped, that she was intentionally staying there. And she only decided to leave because the Queen gave her permission. It's very sympathetic of the Queen to do this. Sabrina naturally asks how she ever warps to a place she's never seen before. Ambrose warps to a motel he never saw before when he tried to warp to a desert. Magic has always been able to find out information for the witch. Of course she can warp to a place she's never seen before at that point. Zelda probably doesn't know exactly what human anatomy is like to every detail, but she was still able to zap up a butler. She tells Sabrina to hide her magic and protect herself, which is also nice of her. She says that Sabrina might replace her as the Queen one day. Sabrina feels bad because she's being nice to her. She says Sabrina's free to go and she'll explain her release to the council. Since she's the Queen, it can make sense that she's confident that she'll get away with this. Sabrina thanks her and walks into a portal. Then I once again wonder why this drooling idiot isn't turning the cardboard bat guy into a frog, or freezing him in time, with the magical artifact at the very least. Or, come on, just outright killing him. Even if we assume that she's conveniently run out of magic from overuse of it every time she was around him being threatened by him, there's still magical artifacts she could use on him. She could have someone cast a truth spell on him. She could slip someone a note, anytime. Sabrina goes home and hugs Hilda, who wants to quit. I wish she did. In retrospect, I really hate how the writer keeps having characters want to do stuff that would clearly be for the best, and they don't do them. So you have to suffer instead. Sabrina wants to just quit magic from now on. Yeah, she has every reason to be traumatized. But there was barely any focus on her experience in that prison. It's not like she had to deal with other criminals. This was a memorable part of the comic, but it's so memorable that when I look back on it, it's surprising to me that it's only one issue. This was a story where, for once, Sabrina and her friends were constantly using magic around mortals. But it's so silly that they had to come up with an excuse for it this time. That it's Halloween. These are witches that erase all of a person's memories if they find out about magic, when everyone would assume that they would just make them forget about magic. Why would that ever be a rule? And not to mention, the characters got away with using magic before Halloween plenty of times without getting punished. So that implies that the rule isn't enforced. Why do they even care that's Halloween? I suppose it was a nice story, but it was completely expendable. So this was an overly depressing, jarring story where, because Sabrina's so powerful, and it's fortunately explained that a truth charm was cast on her to force her to explain every spell she's cast so far, so that they'd find out how she improved as a witch. Because of this, the Magic Council hypocritically imprisons her for being too powerful. Somehow nobody points out that they're being just like mortals. They live in a society where everyone gets used to the idea that everyone has magic, and they learn to trust each other not to abuse magic on them, because it would be illegal. So you'd think that they would have gotten used to the idea of someone having magic and trusting them with it. As far back as the sitcom, Salem got turned into a cat without powers, because the council didn't like him. So everyone would be wondering why they didn't just do that to Sabrina right away. Because they're already allowed to arrest her when she didn't do anything illegal. I think they shouldn't have said surveillance and observation. They should have just phrased it as, we want to study you to find out what kind of magic you're capable of. And even then, they could have easily done it in a way that didn't come off as overly harsh and traumatizing to her. Or at least tried to, like giving her more cozy quarters, had her sit on a sofa. It could have easily been made comfortable for her. And they could have just said, we think you're so awesome as a witch. We want to find out everything you're capable of. They could have very easily not acted like not even cartoon villains, worse than cartoon villains. If they're scared of her, and they're scared of her being angry at them, isn't it obvious that they have to be nice to her? Why would they put themselves at risk then, having her around them? It's just an awful, jarring story. It's a good thing it was explained that she was forced to say how powerful she was. She would have looked like an idiot if she did it just to brag. But we're always under the assumption that witches are being spied on all the time by another witch. You'd think this would have happened a lot earlier. How else are they expecting witches to not go wild on Earth if they're not always spying on them anyways? Why do they even need to cast a truth spell on her? How are witches able to instantly find out that someone needs their memories erased if they're not constantly spying on witches?